Hello and welcome to the Cleine Line. I'm Jamie Cleine, and today I want to talk about something that's becoming harder and harder to ignore in this country: alienation. Not just frustration, not just disagreement, but that deeper feeling people have they are no longer part of the conversation, that decisions are being made around them and not with them, that somehow the country they grew up in is drifting further and further away. And the reason I think this matters so much is because alienation doesn't stay isolated. It doesn't sit quietly forever. If enough people feel unheard or ignored or disconnected, then eventually we see trust starting to break down. Trust in our institutions, trust in all forms of government, and trust in each other. And once that erosion starts, it becomes very difficult to rebuild. Former Prime Minister Helen Clark recently spoke about this in an interview with Stuff, saying the Kiwi dream of work hard and live well is falling apart. I think many New Zealanders know exactly what she means. But I also think the issue runs much deeper than economics alone, because this feeling is growing right across regional and rural New Zealand, from Golden Bay to South Westland, from Northland to Southland, from farming districts to our small provincial towns. There's a growing sense that parts of New Zealand feel disconnected from the direction the country is heading. There's a phrase you hear often now in regional communities. In fact, I would say it epitomises the regional disconnect. The phrase, "nobody listens." And while that may sound simplistic, there's usually something real sitting underneath it. People see schools struggling to retain teachers. They see healthcare becoming more centralised and harder for them to access. They see their own roads deteriorating while there's billions spent on a project in an urban centre somewhere. They see local industries increasingly criticised rather than valued. And over time, communities begin to feel like they're constantly defending their existence instead of, building their future. Now, this isn't about a city versus country thing. New Zealand certainly needs really strong, successful cities. But we also need strong regions, because regional New Zealand is not peripheral to the economy. When you think about it, it really underpins it. You see, the regions are where we grow our food, where we produce energy, where we harvest timber, we generate export revenue, where we frankly support the tourism industry, where we extract our minerals and provide much of the resilience this country depends on. Yet increasingly, people in regional New Zealand feel decisions that affect their livelihoods are made by people who may have never spent meaningful time in those communities. Now, that disconnect matters, because good policy only works when it understands the reality on the ground. And sometimes I think New Zealand has become too centralised, politically, economically and culturally. Too much power, too much decision-making, and too much influence concentrated in a few urban centres. Meanwhile, smaller communities will often feel they are expected to adapt to decisions that they've had very little role in shaping, and that creates frustration. But eventually, some of that frustration becomes alienation. Now, I don't think alienation appeared overnight, and I don't think it belongs to one political party either. This has been building for years. Part of it is economic. People feel squeezed, definitely. Costs rise faster than wages. Young families struggling to get ahead. Small businesses facing mounting compliance costs and other pressure. Farmers, contractors, tradespeople in regional industries often feel they are carrying increasing burdens while almost being talked down to at the same time. But there's another layer to this as well, and that's cultural disconnect. Many people feel that practical experience is no longer valued the way it once was, that decisions are increasingly shaped by ideology or branding or political narratives instead of practical outcomes. Now, ambition matters, environmental responsibility matters, innovation matters, But practical reality matters too, because communities, well, they're not theories, they're a living system. People need roads that work, they need reliable power, they need access to good healthcare, local jobs, affordable transport, and strong volunteer organisations. All of the things that pull together and make great community connection. And when those things begin weakening, well, people notice, especially in regional New Zealand, where resilience matters every single day. The irony is that regional communities are often incredibly self-reliant. They are the ones that rally during floods, that support each other during other community hardship. They volunteer, they adapt. But even resilient communities can feel worn down when they believe nobody is listening. So what happens if we simply ignore alienation and accept that that is the modern way of life? Well, history shows us that alienation is dangerous when ignored for too long, because eventually people stop believing the system works for them. And when that happens, well, division really grows. Trust collapses, social cohesion weakens, and people retreat into anger, cynicism, or complete disengagement. And you can already see signs of that happening internationally. Polarisation, distrust, communities talking past one another instead of with one another. And New Zealand is certainly not immune from that. We like to think of ourselves as a small and connected country, but increasingly there are different realities emerging. Urban and regional, property owners and renters, public sector and private sector, those who feel economically secure and those who don't, those who feel represented and those who don't. The danger is not in disagreement. Healthy democracies need disagreement. The danger is when people stop believing they belong in the same national conversation together as one country. Because once alienation hardens into resentment, rebuilding unity becomes so much harder. So, do we just give up, or are there some things that could help? Well, here's the important part. Alienation is not inevitable, and I actually think New Zealand can turn this around, but it requires a shift in mindset. First, we need to rebuild respect for regional New Zealand, not as some nostalgic idea of the past, but as a critical part of the country's future. That means understanding that strong regional economies strengthen the whole country. Second, we need more balanced decision-making. Policies should not simply be designed in Wellington and imposed outward. Communities need genuine input, not consultation after the fact. Actual involvement early in the legislative process. Third, infrastructure really matters. Reliable roads, good port connectivity, digital connectivity, energy security, healthcare access, water infrastructure. Those are not luxuries, they are the foundations of economic and social resilience. Fourthly, we need to restore confidence in the productive industry. That doesn't mean abandoning environmental responsibility. It means recognising that sustainability and economic development must work together. A country that cannot produce, build, generate or grow things becomes really vulnerable very quickly. And fifth, perhaps most importantly, we need to lower the temperature of public debate. Too much modern politics relies on division. Too much energy goes into labelling and attacking and dismissing people. But most New Zealanders are actually practical people. They want balance, fairness, opportunity and stability. And they want to feel heard. They don't want to be demonised or ignored or lectured to. Just heard. So I think maybe what New Zealand needs now is a bit of a back to the future moment. Not going backwards, but rediscovering some balance again. Remembering that local communities matter, that resilience matters, that self-reliance matters, and that productive economies matter, that strong regions help create a strong nation. And perhaps most importantly, remembering that people need hope, not just slogans, not just endless crisis narratives, but hope and belief in a strategy. The belief that you work hard, contribute to your community and raise your family well, and that you can still build a decent life in New Zealand. That used to feel achievable for most people, and we need to get back to that. Because if too many New Zealanders feel disconnected from the future in this country, then eventually the country itself becomes so much weaker. But if we can rebuild trust, rebuild balance, and reconnect communities to decision-making, then I think New Zealand still has enormous potential ahead of it. Thanks for listening to the Cleine Line. I hope this episode resonated with you and you choose to share it around. Send it to someone in your community and start a conversation, because rebuilding connection in this country won't happen from the top down alone. It starts community by community, conversation by conversation, and maybe that's how we begin closing the divide. Thank you for listening. See you next time. I'm Jamie Cleine, and this has been The Cleine Line.